Hello, welcome to Sky Sweaty Record Review, episode 173, the only first listen new music review show hosted by a French professor. Well, usually it's after leaving the gym, but this is going to be one of my special office hours episodes. It's alright, it's my birthday. I wanted to do an extra one. I'm going to get super professory. So if you don't want to hear professorial talk about world music, I'll see you on the next episode. But I'm going to be talking about a group called Tinariwen and their album Amadjar. Now, already, those are a lot of different sounding words than I'm usually saying here. And I'm going to go into a sort of extended discourse about the nature of colonialism and music appreciation. But before I get to that, let me actually review the music first, because that's what obviously matters most. This is an amazingly listenable, highly enjoyable record. It's got this great atmosphere to it, kind of a droney feel quite often. It's music basically from Mali, but I'd sort of call it Saharan music, So it's African music, but not really with drums, with guitars. And kind of droning in the way that it sort of goes away from a note and then comes back. Has a lot of resolution, nice kind of sloppy drums that just sort of, not sloppy, right? Like they don't lose rhythm or anything, but it's not about like dancing. It's more about like setting sort of a tone. I put it, obviously, well not obviously, unsurprisingly, in the same general category as maybe Ali Farka Touré, although maybe not quite as precise musically as that, or even much more closely with Moroccan music like Nas El Rouan, which I don't know how to say their name. It's the Moroccan group that starts with the name Nas in it. It's the most famous Moroccan group out there. So let me just play a track and see if you like it, because the album, it's not particularly samey. There's a fair amount of development, but I would say this is the most kind of Western appropriate song. Like the song is maybe easiest introduction to their music. None of it is particularly challenging. It's all sort of in this general ballpark. But have a listen to this track. It's called Kel Tinawen. And everything is in Tamashek, I believe. Maybe some Arabic as well, I'm not sure. I don't speak either language, so it's all Greek to me. That was a really bad joke. You know what though? I'm a professor, I'm a father. I can make bad jokes. Okay, here's Kel Tinawen from Tinariwen. And if you like this, I think it's hard not to, really give it a shot. Because the main thing I would say about this music is it's really listenable. You can listen to it intently, you can listen to it distractedly, and it just works basically at all times. Here we go. So you hear that, right? Like the nice kind of guitar driven in the background. People often kind of call this like blues music, and I think in some ways it is. The simplicity of the music, the kind of sadness to it, but then also a little bit of the shuffle that goes along with it. And you hear it tends to basically always resolve, and I like the singing style where the guy talks, the leader, I think there's a leader, and then people tend to respond with some kind of chorus, in response. So there's 3 minutes and 50 seconds of my music review. Now it's time to put on my professor pants and really go in to the nature of colonialism and listening to music. And I'm going to do that by telling you a story. Way before I was a professor, before I was even a college student, I was a high school student. And I grew up in Boston. I was very lucky. There's a lot of good radio stations there. And so I was listening to some station with my buddy Brad, and there was some world music thing going on, and we listened to it, and we tried to get down with it, and we tried to like it, and then this song came on, and it completely blew our minds. We just sat in the car, and I think we were somewhere, I think in Harvard Square, probably, and we were sitting there, we're just like, oh, this is so good. This is so good. And then we had to wait like 3 songs, and then when the person said something, when they're like, okay, and that was da-da-da, I think it was 90.9 in Boston, and they just go, and this is what I heard. And that was Albini. That was the only information that I had. This is pre-internet, pre-Shazam, pre any of that. So I know there's a song I want to hear, but all that I know about it is that it's from somewhere in Africa, and the name of the track is Albini. So I did what anybody did in those days, and I went to a music store. I went to HMV in Harvard Square. It's now a bank, but before that it was a like outfitter for outdoorsmanship. It's sad what's happening to the world. And I went to the world music section, and by some miracle, the first person I asked was able to decipher what I meant. Hi, do you have a Albini? He's like, what? It's like African Albini. And somehow he knew that I was talking about the song I Bine by the artist Ali Farka Touré, who's from Mali, much like the band I'm reviewing today. And he managed to get me a CD that was like a compilation of different music, and the song that I heard on the radio that one day was on there. I loved it. I listened to it over and over and over again, and I felt this sense of like ownership, like I had discovered this person. It's mine. Ali Farka Touré was mine. And then the betrayal. He released an album with Ry Cooder. I know who Ry Cooder is. My brother's like a huge fan, and he did the soundtrack to, you know, Southern Comfort and Paris, Texas, and Streets of Fire, right? Like, he was like a famous guitar player. And he looked like me, more or less. And now he's doing an album with Ry Cooder. I felt like I had lost something that I felt that I owned. And I'm going to get into pretty soon why that's such a problematic idea that I had in my head. In a similar way, with this guy, with this group, Tinariwen, most of the album is featuring and is produced by Warren Ellis, one of the Bad Seeds from Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. So it's like, is this really the real thing? Is this really an authentic musical product? Or is this just some westernized thing? What was the real problem? I now realize that my disappointment at that point was because I was on what I call, and now I say I call it, I'm not the first person to come up with these theories. There's a lot of theories about colonialism and culture, and so I'm not some trailblazer, but I think I'm explaining it well. I was on what I call the colonial hunt for authenticity. So if you think about it, right, my people, right, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and just in general, people who have been on the receiving end of all the privilege of humanity for a couple thousand years, maybe even more, have always been colonizers, right? And in particular, you know, in Africa, go into Africa and take the land and take it back. Now, because of my education, I don't want to subjugate people. I don't want to enslave them. I want to treat them with respect. But there's some part of me that's still colonial. And I think it's really my ears. Because what I want is to hunt and find something in that culture that's mine. So that little bit of Mali, Ali Farka Touré, was mine. I discovered it. Okay, I discovered it on public radio in Boston, but still, other people didn't know, and I did. This was my little spot. This was my soul food restaurant that I discovered, okay? And when Ry Cooder took it away from me, I felt like I lost it. It's like when you go to another city, and then you go, oh my God, there's too many tourists here. Well, what are you? You're a tourist. And for some reason, when you see other tourists in a tourist spot, you hate them because of how they reflect you. I hated Ry Cooder being on the Ali Farka Touré album because it was a reminder of myself. Now, I'm going to end this whole video soon. Actually, not that soon. I'm going to go on more. But I'm going to end the video with a discussion of the term cultural appropriation. But we're headed there. And I think my take on it might be a little bit different. So here I was. Like, I'd lost Ali Farka Touré. My cultural hunt for authenticity was destroyed by the great popularizer Ry Cooder, okay? Like a year later, I decided to get into Cuban music, and I bought a box set, also at HMV. That was a great store. And then Wim Wenders made the Buena Vista Social Club, and I had to stop listening to that. You know, there goes that. I was on my colonial hunt for something authentic that was mine, but I kept on losing it. The worst offender in all this, of course, is NPR itself. Oh my God. National Public Radio. If they discover something, I feel like it's destroyed forever. Because that means there's other colonizers like myself going out there trying to discover, and they've either got the same thing or they got there first. When doing a very small amount of research on Tinariwen, I discovered a similar thing. Like NPR called them the real rebels of blues or something like that. And it makes sense, the band was founded in a refugee camp in Libya. They're Tuareg people, which are from a specific region of Mali, and they were in exile in Libya during kind of like a civil war, actually more of an oppression of the Tuareg people. So they are real rebels. They're not like rebels in some kind of vague sense of I moved out the crib because I hated cutting grass. Not really like that, real threats to themselves, and they were members of some kind of auxiliary army by Gaddafi. Very complicated stuff. And their heritage is of the Berber people, which is a whole nother oppressed subclass in Africa. And so something about NPR discovering it makes me feel like I lost it. Now, when I lost Ali Farka Touré, it was interesting because one of my best friends, actually, I have a picture of her over there. Oh, it's okay. One of my best friends is from Morocco, and her name is Sumia. And, we are real friends. We really understand each other. I care about her. We've known each other for a long time. I'm not friends with her in a colonial way. But the colonial heritage still seeps its way into our relationship in ways which I can't avoid. Well, I can't avoid. But in ways which I wasn't aware of. So she introduced me to that Moroccan band I mentioned previously, Nasser Houine, and first of all, their music is amazing, okay? If you've never heard them, look in the description below. I'll include a link to them. They were also one of the primary influences on Tinariwen, one of the most influential bands in all of Africa. The atmosphere that they set, the sort of droning, mystical, transcendental, trance-like music, it's just the best, okay? So there's two things. There's the part where it's great music, and then there's the part where there's the colonial search for authenticity. And I felt I had a Moroccan who introduced it to me. I'm good. And I'd never heard of them before. I'm good. So sort of Ali Farka Touré and Nasser Houine are sort of on the opposite ends of the same spectrum. But of course, what's the thing that unites them? They're just great music. And in some ways, I would be in all ways, I would be way more evolved if I wasn't up in my head about it. If I was just some dummy who just liked music and didn't have to think about authenticity, didn't have to think about these things. In some ways, my education, my position of privilege and power, it's only self-reflective enough in the way that it helps me to reinforce those systems of power, unless I'm thinking about it on the next level, on the deeper level. I told you I was going to get professory. It's my birthday. Maybe I should put on my fancy scarf. No. Okay. And then it all kind of gets tied in even more by the fact that I'm a French professor. Why did I like these groups? Why was I drawn to these groups and not groups from a different part of Africa? Well, this right here is a typical French textbook. French world. Connect yourself to the Francophone world. Now, this is a well-meaning textbook, okay? When you see the word francophonie, that was a term that was invented in the 20th century, and it was to enlarge people's sense of French beyond France, because, of course, French is spoken all over the world by over 200 million people on all continents. Even penguins speak French. And all French textbooks always have a little image like this. And if you see, the colors where they speak French are, the countries where they speak French are a different color. And so this is a real boon for French professors because we get to talk about more than just France. But it means that we're drawn to these countries, especially countries like Mali, which have a French colonial history, which mean that's one of the official languages there. Or we're drawn to Haiti. But why? This is literally the colonial heritage. If it weren't for the French colonizers taking over these countries and promoting the slave trade, there would be no Français monde. In a way, by trying to emphasize and celebrate the diversity of the French-speaking world, it is in some ways reinforcing that exploitation. But then what's the answer? Ignore them? No. We just have to take the good stuff. And the good stuff is that French students, my French students, I created a whole unit on Mali one year. And it was all about Ali Farka Touré. And so what? Am I some bad guy? No, I shared knowledge about a great artist with a bunch of students. And one of them came back to me and said, hey, I really actually like that music, which is the biggest compliment a college student can ever give you. So, you know, what do we do? I'm not sure, I might have an answer at the end. I also teach a movie called Monsieur Lazare, which is an excellent Canadian movie about an Algerian immigrant who teaches in a Canadian school. And in it, there's this well-meaning white female teacher who's flirting with him constantly. And he goes over to her house and she like has all these pictures of herself with people from Africa. And she has like, you know, all this African music on, and it's just like, oh, oops. And it's a really subtle, wonderful movie. Look it up. If you have Canopy, it's for free. Because it shows the danger of exoticism. And she's not, I mean, she's really the most well-meaning person, and she's very kind to him, and she does treat him like a real human being. But on some level, you see the pain on his face, that he knows that to some extent, he is an object. He is a discovered country, much like Albini was for me in Boston back in 1993. So, that all brings us, I believe, to the question of cultural appropriation, which is an interesting question that we have now. You know, should we listen to Led Zeppelin because it's white people stealing black music, right? Like, should we listen to Eric Clapton? Well, no one should ever listen to Eric Clapton. As my birthday request, never listen to Eric Clapton, okay? But I mean, you know, should we listen to white artists make rap music, play jazz? Should anything that is made by one culture be played by people from another culture? I think that's one of the most dangerous creations of the academic mindset. I think cultural appropriation should be stricken from the world record. I think it has disastrous consequences which people aren't thinking through. Because if we are to assume that, let's say, only African Americans can make rap music, a logical extension would be then that African Americans should not make music from the European tradition. So, in my opinion, I want everybody playing Mozart. I want everybody playing Bach, which means I want everybody rapping. The key to all of this is just acknowledgement and understanding. Like, that's the key to everything. You know, of course, there's going to be some part of my colonial ears that when I hear Tinariwen, I'm going to be like, ooh, this is authentic. I'm in the Sahara with all of these interesting exotic people. Of course, that is going to exist in my head. I have to acknowledge it. I have to process it. I have to realize that I'm doing it, that on some level I am turning these people into objects that are used for my enjoyment. And then I have to move beyond it. And after acknowledging it, enjoy it, because it's excellent music. So I don't know. There you go. There's Professor Payne's take on colonial listening and why cultural appropriation is a term that is actually more racist than helpful. You see also I put this Tintin up here in the back. I love Tintin. But you want to talk about problematic. There's a lot of problematic images behind me, actually. That was intentional. Okay, well, until next time, your 42-year-old professor who has been talking to you about music for a year will say what he always says at the end of every episode. There's the camera. Okay, Sky here. I'm actually about to teach my class, but I realized I should probably nuance that little thing about cultural appropriation a little bit more. It's my birthday, so I get to nuance. The question really isn't a question of race or culture. It's really a question of power. And so I think we need to focus on that. Because, you might have noticed in my office I had a Hank Williams bobblehead, Country music, in theory, can be appropriated by other people, the same race and gender, but who come from a different cultural circumstance, who are in a superior position in society. So really, I think we need to be focusing on the relationship between power and culture, and a lot less on race and culture, because that's what really matters. Okay, my students are gonna come in, and it'll be super weird if I'm like doing a show. See, there's the door, my office. I'm really a professor, it's true. Okay, here's the camera again.